kibble is ultra, ultra, ultra processed. Like it is cooked and extruded at extreme high temperatures, like 350 degrees, 4 times over. And so we know what's happened. What happens when you high heat process ingredients like this is that it creates these carcinogenic compounds. Have you heard of AGEs? Stands for advanced glycation end products. There's a lot of studying on it now for what's happening with people food, the ultra processed people food.
An entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow. What's cracking?
What up, everybody? We're going to talk today about dog food. If you can believe that, we're going to talk about dog food. And here's the deal. I am a wellness junkie. As you all know, I am very, very focused on what I put into my body, what my family eats, how we move, the things that we do that ultimately make us who we are, right? Now, I've been a dog dad for the last, I think I got my first dog in 2001, so the last 24 years. My dogs are my third and fourth sons. Bowie and Murphy are like, I am madly in love with those animals. And every dog that I've had has always truly just become an extension of me. Like I am just passionate about animals and the connection that human beings are able to build and cultivate with dogs specifically. I know horses are also like very connected, but I really do think that the relationship that human beings are able to develop with dogs is unlike anything else. And so, I mean, I'm now really grateful that I'm feeding my dog food that I've always wanted to go raw with the dogs. And living in New York City, it's not easy when you have big dogs specifically because you need freezer space. And, you know, I did think that it was going to be a pain in the butt with thawing and everything. And the truth of the matter is that I now feed my dogs raw food from a company called We Feed Raw. And it was the best decision I've ever made. Like, it's only been about 2 months and I can see drastic changes in the animals. It makes me feel good when I give these dogs this food. Like, they are obviously stoked and fired up that they're getting this like insanely delicious human grade, you know, dog food that's made in a USDA facility. But it makes me feel good that I'm giving them the absolute best food that they can get. So I'm sitting here with the co-founder and chief brand officer, Amy Zalneraitis, and her story is really interesting of how We Feed Raw kind of came to be. We're going to get into that, but I'm really excited to introduce her because, you know, I feel like I've really leveled up. I feel like I've really leveled up with We Feed Raw, and it also happens to be one of the fastest growing, or potentially I think it actually is the fastest growing D2C raw dog food companies on the market today. So, Amy, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy it's been like 2 months since you started feeding them too, because now you've really started to see the benefits, you know? It's always good to talk to someone after they've seen the light.
Well, you know, I think like the most obviously for me it was like a 10-day transition, right? Mm-hmm. And we didn't see much of an issue, right? Yeah. Like I felt like you had asked me, hey, do your dogs, are they picky about what they eat? And I was like, absolutely not. These dogs will eat anything, mm-hmm. including goose poop, a lot of it. But the transition was pretty smooth, mm-hmm. and I think Murphy had like, you know, loose stool 1 or 2 days. Mm-hmm. But other than that, very smooth. Yeah. The way they, like how excited they are to eat now is like, it's just different. Yeah. And then what I really started to notice, like within the first 3-4 weeks, was really how shiny their coats got.
Yeah. That's like the first benefit that and the smaller. Or like those are the first two that people see.
So why don't you just give us a quick sort of background on you? I know that you have a background in marketing, mm-hmm. and your sister founded We Feed Raw and unfortunately passed away in 2014. Mm-hmm. And you sort of took that as an opportunity to fulfill her dream, yeah. and continue building this brand that she was so passionate about.
Yeah. So yeah, I never applied for this job or really set out to have this job, but As my sister started this company, she was a dog lover, huge dog lover. We grew up with parents that were always rescuing animals, so we really learned to be that way. And she had a bunch of rescues and started making raw meals herself and really kind of just like grew the business from there. But when she passed away, my family and I, despite being completely devastated, stepped in to keep her vision alive. And not just to keep her vision alive, but really I wanted to make it as big and as meaningful and as impactful as it could possibly be. So that's still what I'm doing today. Although I will say that it's grown into something a bit more too. Like, I'm truly passionate about this. I believe in this mission so much, and it's so gratifying to be able to help so many dogs and their humans live better lives together. So I really look at it as a gift that my sister left me, like a job that I love doing and want to, I'm excited to wake up to every day. So yeah, that's really kind of like how it all kind of came to be. But it's changed a lot over the years. Since my sister started it, it was like very small and named something different. Wasn't really a brand. It was more just like a supplier of raw. So I came in with like this marketing background, and that was one of the first things I did, is like make this a brand. Hired an agency. We worked together. It was like an 8-month process to really turn this into We Feed Raw. And I think after our product, it's still like one of our best assets. Without brand, you don't really have much, right? Like, you can have an amazing product, but without a good brand, nobody remembers that product. Nobody returns to that product. So that's really kind of been my focus.
I think it's like I'm like, the thought just came to mind for me because you said, without brand. Community, I think, is so important in business, right? And I think a lot of people overlook that idea. Oh, community. Like, I come from restaurants, right? And without community, restaurants die, right? Like, you need people to be excited to come, and then when they get there, have a great time and want to come back, right? Like, that is community, right? Like, people come together in a place and they look forward to it and they tell everybody about it. And I don't think that there's any better way to get, like, the relationship that people have with their dogs is like the worst day, hands down. And I believe this to my core. I lost my father in 2001. I lost Duke in 2000, my first dog, in 2004. When I lost Duke, it was the worst day of my life. And people say, well, it was like worse than your, and I was like, yes, because the relationship that I had with this animal was just, it was, like, I can't describe it. I can't describe
pure
it.
Love with
pure love, pure love. And the dog saw me through everything. I mean, I went through a really transitional period with that animal. Like, he saw me in the dark days and was there for me the whole time, even though I was not the greatest dog dad. And then when I came out of that, like, loved me as much, and being able to provide something that could potentially, like, keep your dog healthy. Like, how do you not build, like, that is, in my opinion, and I don't mean just keep your dog healthy, like, keep your dog healthier for longer periods of time.
Like, their health span is better and their lifespan is better, but like their quality of life. I totally agree. I think, like, the product is doing that, but I think our brand really, people connect to our brand because it's authentic, it's bold. We're a challenger brand. We're going up against the pet food industrial complex. It's a lot of education that's required. There's a lot of kind of ruffling feathers, and we're out there doing that. We're not starting fights, but we're definitely standing up for what we believe is right. And
pointing out what's wrong.
Yeah, pointing out what's wrong and saying, like, I think people want to be part of a movement like that too. Like, we make them feel like they're part of a movement that's actually an exciting movement that's changing dogs' lives and their humans' lives for the better. And it's questioning the status quo. It's challenging the status quo. And I think that there's something really exciting about that that is integral to our brand for sure.
I think there's no surprise that the dog food industry is a big one, right? It's a big one. It's a massive.
$35 billion.
Market. That's serious. And I think only in maybe like the last 10 years or so, you've started to see people creating in that space in a really kind of modern, cool way.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's been dinosaur age
It really
for a
has.
really long time.
Yeah.
And really, I think, you know, we were talking before we started shooting. You said, you know, people, when Kibble came out, people were still feeding their dogs scraps. So these guys and gals had to come to market and say, hey, like, you've been feeding your dog food leftovers.
Yeah.
Now we want you to pay for it.
Yeah.
And now we're going to tell you that the scraps that you've been feeding your dogs is killing them.
Yeah, it's dangerous. Like, don't feed them anything real. It has to come from this scientifically formulated bag it's the only safe and complete and balanced thing that you should be feeding them. And people, it was genius. People bought into it and still to this day buy into it. I mean, it's interesting if you look at the history of what dogs have eaten. Like 30,000 years ago, dogs evolved from wolves. In the wild, they were eating prey model raw diet. They were hunting prey animals, eating them. So muscle meat, organ meat, bones, whatever maybe vegetation happened to be in the prey animal stomach. 16,000 years ago, humans domesticated them for, herding, protection, companionship, and they ate what the humans are eating, still meat, organs, bones, maybe some plant matter. And they lived alongside us and kind of ate the leftovers of what we were eating, still scavenged. You know, they weren't like living in houses this whole time. They were still out there like eating what they could find too. And it wasn't until 1860 that the first dry dog food biscuit was invented by this businessman named James Spratt, who was in England, and he saw sailors throwing hardtack on the docks. Like, hardtack is this processed food that sailors used to eat, and the stray dogs were gobbling it up. So he had a light bulb moment and invented Spratt's dog cakes. And it was kind of like this huge hit. And then in 1920,
so it was that guy only for like those 60 years.
Yes, like that's like when that was marks the introduction of commercial pet food. James Spratt.
Guy killed it.
Yeah,
60 years, cornered the market.
And like not any sort of animal, just a businessman. And then in the 1920s, they started canning horse meat and selling that as dog food. And that went on for a while. Still, people were feeding, other things, right? They were still feeding leftovers. And then in like the mid World War II, there was a metal shortage because it was all the metal was going to the war effort. So they had to stop the canning and think about what could go well in bags. And what goes well in bags?
Processed food.
Yeah, like kibble, dry kibble. So in 1956, Purina introduced, the extrusion technology was invented, and Purina introduced the first Purina dog chow, and it has dominated the market ever since, like dominated. So that really is what most dogs are still eating today.
So like, if you had to break down the difference between what a kibble does and what raw food does, like, how would you tell somebody that doesn't know anything?
Oh yeah, I love talking about this, although my team's always like, okay, like it's like no fear mongering. But I do think like we really don't want to shame people for feeding kibble, because it is a very cost-effective and convenient option, okay? That I will give it. And sometimes people can't afford to feed 100% raw because you have like multiple big dogs in the home. So, doing partial raw feeding with kibble is totally something we support. But I think it's important that we educate people on what kibble actually is so that they can make better choices, right? Because if you don't know, you don't know.
I want to know like the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, okay. So
because I've heard some funky stuff.
My 3 big issues with kibble are: 1, that it is absolutely packed with highly refined carbohydrates, okay? Dogs have no need for carbohydrates. That doesn't mean they can't digest them, but they just have no requirement for them. But then you have kibble companies that are putting anywhere from 40 to 70% cheap, highly refined carbohydrates in their food. Corn, grains, like all of this stuff that it's not even like, I'm not talking about low glycemic carbohydrates, like, healthy fruits and veggies. These are like the lowest level. And then they're highly processed. And then these are spiking dogs' blood sugar, causing inflammation. We know that 59% of dogs in the US are obese or overweight. The second thing is that the quality of the ingredients is really low. So you have, these cheap, highly refined grains. You have plant-derived proteins, and then you have these rendered animal proteins that are coming from a rendering. And they're all feed-grade ingredients, so meaning they've been deemed unsafe to enter the human food supply. So, just not fit for human consumption. So there's a lot of things that can happen in that when you have them something in that category.
Mm-hmm.
And then third,
So like there's like no kind of regulation there?
I mean, it's hard to, there's so much like, yes, there is regulation, but what happens is like these rendering plants are collecting animal sources from all different places. So that can be expired grocery store meat, that can be, animals that died other than by slaughter. There's been reports that, sometimes this can even be euthanized animals that end up in there, and they grind it all together. It's like boiled in this big vat. They skim the fat off, and then they dry the rest of it into a protein powder that then is sold to these pet food manufacturers. So the pet food manufacturers might not even know everything that's in that rendered product. You know what I mean?
Doesn't sound like anybody really does.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's pretty loose. Like, I mean, there's reports that, they're not taking the plastic off of the expired grocery store. They're not taking like the tags off the animals. They're just all getting thrown in there into this like big vat. It's pretty nasty.
Wow.
There's some documentaries. One of them is called Pet Fooled that I would recommend watching because it really is an eye-opening look into this stuff. But the third one, and might even be the most important, is that kibble is ultra, ultra, ultra processed. Like it is cooked and extruded at extreme high temperatures, like 350 degrees, 4 times over. And so we know what's happened. What happens when you high heat process ingredients like this is that it creates these carcinogenic compounds. Have you heard of AGEs? Stands for advanced glycation end products. There's a lot of studying on it now for what's happening with people food, the ultra processed people food. And AGEs cause all sorts of chronic diseases, cancer, metabolic disease, neurologic dysfunction. There's a study actually out of the Medical University of South Carolina where scientists looked at the different levels of AGEs in various pet foods. And obviously kibble and canned were the highest, and the minimally processed ones like raw were the lowest. But what was so scary about it is that they found that the levels of AGEs in processed dog food were 100 times higher than those found in processed people food. And so like... these dogs, they're not getting a break from it. They're eating kibble meal after meal, day after day. It's the only thing they eat. So like, I think what's the statistic about like 63% of the calories consumed by people in the U.S. come from ultra processed food. And that's scary, but like it's scarier for the dogs because
100%.
Like most dogs, 100% of their calories are coming from ultra processed food. So those are my 3 big issues with extruded dry food. Canned food too is ultra processed. So I think it's about getting people to see what's actually happening, what this food is actually made of, and then making better choices. Like we really try not to be extremists about it. Like it's not all raw or nothing. We're not the pet food police, but when you know better, you do better. And we have people that feed 50% kibble, 50% raw, and you will see like you can make a meaningful difference in your dog's health by just adding some raw to your dog's bowls.
What if, okay, so I mean, I know you have a company here, so like, but what if someone is a hunter and just has like a ton of venison in his freezer? Yeah. Like, can that person just come out, like start adding that? And
yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna like, I think as personally, I would say yes, that's totally fine. And like your dog's getting real food and they can, digest, they're literally equipped to digest and process raw meat. What we do though is make sure that your dog is getting everything they need in the correct proportions and ratios. So like it's, roughly 80% muscle meat, roughly 10% organ meat, all of which is secreting organ. And then we have the bone in there too. And then we do add some essential vitamins and minerals just to, ensure full and proper nutrition. I think sometimes we get careful about, there's a lot of DIY raw feeders and like more power to you if you do that, but it's hard to do it right all the time by yourself. It's a lot of work. And I think, there's a lot of pushback from the vet community in general on raw feeding for a lot of reasons. But, I will say that if they're seeing, some of these dogs come in that are on poorly made, homemade raw diets, it gives raw a bad name, So like, of course, it's fine to give your dog some venison that you can, but like, I think you just want to be careful that you're giving your dog complete
balanced.
Yeah.
What I told our vet that we were feeding
How'd that go?
We feed raw, and he was fired up for us.
Really? That's amazing. I'm hearing so much more of this lately. Like even in the last 5 years, it has started to change, and it's so exciting. But I mean, there's still we still have people that get so excited to feed our food, and then they go to the vet and they're like, oh no, you can't feed raw. It's going to make your dog sick or you sick. And I think that what's happened, like there's plenty of raw companies like us in the US that are providing a safe way to feed raw and a complete and balanced way to feed raw. But I don't know if the vets just don't learn about that in vet school.
So when you say a safe way, what do you mean?
First of all, sourcing. The sourcing is, we have very high quality sourcing. We produce in a USDA certified facility. And then we use a cold pressurization process, which is an all natural process that uses pure cold water at extreme pressure to inactivate any potentially harmful pathogens that might be in the meat. So E. coli, salmonella, listeria. We do this because we believe it's the right thing to do, because it, listen, dogs can handle raw meat without this, most healthy dogs, but the dogs in the US, not all of them are healthy, right? It depends on the state of their gut microbiome that when they come to us. If they've been eating a highly processed diet for most of their lives, they might not handle that so well. And then we're also, the FDA has a law too that you can have zero pathogens in pet food, zero. Like there's a zero tolerance policy. So if you're raw pet food and you're not using some sort of kill step like HPP, then you're just asking for recalls. And also it's not safe for the people feeding it in the home. If you have young children, if you have immunocompromised people in the home, if you have elderly people. So it really allows us to provide a safe product that hasn't, like, we're still not heating it. We haven't added any chemicals to it. It's a natural process. Cold pressurization is used ubiquitously throughout people food. So baby food, juices, coffees, other meats, seafood. It's really, we've probably, both of us have eaten HPP food this week.
Oh yeah, I know all about it.
So, you do?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I mean, so it's, the purist will sometimes have issues with it, but
the juice community.
Yeah, the juice community, I know. But I mean, we honestly, there's nothing, if you don't, I really, safety was something I made a priority from the beginning. And if you want to scale a raw company in the US, you better be making sure that you are doing something. Like, so I love it as a solution. And we've talked to a lot of the PhDs that work at Hyperbaric, which is the global leader in HPP equipment, and looked at all the studies. Like, it doesn't change the nutritional value. It even like, there's some studies showing it even increases the digestibility. So it's a great option. And I love that we're using it.
So in regards to like, and obviously I know there's no, you guys aren't making any claims about this does that, but what can someone see, or what have you guys seen along the journey in terms of just overall health span?
Yeah. I mean, we get so many stories. It's crazy. The other day, we just got something from a woman whose Pomeranian had been suffering from seizures, once a week seizures. The vets couldn't help her. She was at a loss. She didn't know what to do. This was going on for so long. She just decided one day to throw out all the food, throw out all the junky treats. She started our food, and the dog has not had a seizure in 6 months. Like, it's amazing. Just like amazing stuff, you know?
Do you think that that's like the sugar was creating?
I mean, there could be so many things. I mean, there's so many things. I don't know exactly what she was even feeding. I know it was some sort of ultra processed food, but there's so many species inappropriate ingredients in there, and also just like junky fillers that could have been having an allergic reaction. I mean, there's just so many things. And this isn't to say, I'm always careful to be like, raw feeding isn't a cure-all. It's not a panacea. It doesn't mean like it's going to necessarily cure your dog of everything, but it does give your dog the best chance at a happy, healthy life. It really does. So like, oh my gosh, we see so many. We have another dog recently, like a pit mix, who was young, and he was covered in hives, hair falling out, patchy everywhere. The owner was taking him to the vet once a month for these very expensive steroid shots. Nothing was working. She switched to our food about a month and a half later, almost completely cured. Like, no more shots. The fur was growing back. The hives were gone. It just, I mean, food can be miraculous.
I wish I would have known about that when Duke was around, because that was his story.
Yeah.
You know, he died young for a pit bull. He died at 9. Typically pit bulls, you get a good like 13, 14 years. And all of a sudden, like, and I feel so passionate about this topic because of how much I love dogs. Yeah. And I know if I love dogs so much, pretty much every single dog owner feels the same way. Yeah. And if you can, like, I mean, it's always awesome sitting across from a great entrepreneur, right? For me. but a great entrepreneur that's making that has a business in a world that I'm like, so like, I would love my dogs to live forever.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know,
Yeah.
they're all my dogs are tattooed on my body. They are.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so like, I just feel like understanding how much of an impact going from Kibble to raw, or at least introducing some raw to the Kibble.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we say we're not anti-kibble. We're just anti-only kibble for an entire lifetime. We all always believe that more raw is better, but we really have to be able to meet people where they are, and we don't want to be exclusionary. We used to be a lot more. My sister founded this company. It was founded on like the fanatics, right? Like these are the people that were there. It's hard customers to have. Like, how did the animal die exactly? Did you kill it with your own bow and arrow? You know, it's like this very extreme. And I'm so grateful for those people because they.
Did you kill it with your own bow and arrow?
I mean, like I'm exaggerating, but it was close.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
they
yeah,
have to
yeah,
know
yeah.
everything, and it was hard. It was just not scalable with
Yeah.
that level. And also at the time, you know, back in 2014, this was even a lot more fringe. Like it's still sort of fringe. It's the fastest growing segment of the pet food market, but people are very we're very intense about it. And I think now we're just a lot less. We've softened our approach. It's like, however you want to feed raw, we want to be a resource for you, and we want to support you. And it's really kind of, I think it's resonated with our audience. It's hard not to make people feel like you're shaming them when you're like, you know,
Right, when the masses
when
are
you're
doing
like, this
something
is bad,
and
and they're like, but
on.
I thought, and my vet is telling me this, and it's like, you know, it can feel, when you're challenging the mainstream, it can feel like fear mongering, but like it's just uncovering the truth and like, you know, putting it out there. So we really have to toe that line of not making people feel bad about what they're doing. It's funny because whenever I, you know, get on calls with people or meeting a new partner or something, and I ask what they're feeding, they're like, don't hate me, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to judge you. I promise. Like, it's okay, you know?
I want to get into the business a little bit.
Yeah.
So this is a question that I like to ask, and I think that, you know, the fact that you said it's the fastest growing segment in pet food, and pet food is a very big segment, right?
Yeah.
And now, like, I mean, I know a buddy of mine who was the founder of Freshly, Mikey Weistrap. He moved on from Freshly. And he opened up a veterinary business, like a way more sort of modern, sort of easy to walk into, bit more technical, like veterinary experience.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sort of energy in this pet space now. Competition. So you said that it's the fastest growing segment in the pet food space. Yeah. And I know how I feel about competition in my business. How do you view competition?
So I think fresh and raw are sort of in the same little category together. So the fresh ones, like the gently cooked brands out there, are, I would say, probably a little bit bigger. But I don't, honestly, it's not like the raw market is saturated. Like it would actually help to have, we have I would call it very friendly competition. Like we all sort of support each other because we're all educating. Like it's a lot of education. We have to take a very education-driven approach to this. And it's not something you can just like throw money at. Like you have to be very thoughtful. I think like we prioritize platforms that allow for deeper discussions like this because we have to be able to educate people. There's a lot of, I mean, I call it brainwashing, but like people don't understand that dogs weren't always eating kibble, or that there's another option, or that, you know, people will often say to us, well, I'm feeding like a really high quality kibble. I'm like, I don't really know if there's such a thing, you know. I mean, there's obviously some kibble companies that might have a little bit better sourcing, but
at the end of the day, it's ultra processed.
That's the thing. So, and then
can you just break down that ultra processed thing though? So for people that are listening that don't really understand what that means, I think when people think ultra processed, they immediately think of Cheetos. Yeah. And but what is it?
So it's just the process of like how the food is made, and you're changing like the molecular structure to such a way, like this is what's happening with people food, that our bodies and dogs' bodies don't know what to do with it, right? And then again, going back to the AGEs, which is like one of the biggest problems with ultra processed food for people and for pets, is like the level of AGEs is so much higher. These carcinogenic compounds, so much, and they know that these carcinogenic. It's not like we don't know what these carcinogenic compounds do. We know that they cause these chronic diseases, and that the levels are just so much higher from the processing. in ultra processed foods than like a whole food or a minimally processed food, for example. So that's really what the danger is with the processing.
The company was founded. Your sister started sort of noodling around in 2009, right?
Yeah.
And the company was actually founded, really sort of launched in 2000 and...
Well, so let's see. It's kind of an interesting story because in 2007, my sister, the seed was planted because there was a big recall in pet food. I don't know if you remember this, but it was some wheat gluten that had been contaminated. A Chinese manufacturer had used melamine, which is an industrial chemical, to boost the protein levels in the wheat gluten. Wheat gluten is sold to pet food manufacturers as a protein source. The manufacturers sold it to all of these pet food companies. It ended up in the food, and it was killed and made sick thousands of cats and dogs. So it was like big news. It made headlines. So I think it was really like marks a huge shift because you can actually see when raw started to become bigger then too. It was like people were starting to think more critically about like, what am I actually putting in my dog's bowl? And like, where is this coming from? And like, I haven't asked any questions. So
nobody knows.
Nobody
knows.
Yeah. So I think then though, it really started to be something that people thought about more critically. And my sister was one of those people. So that's when how she sort of got into raw feeding. So yeah, she just started making the meals herself, became an expert at it, and then friends meals, and then friends of friends. It was really just like that type of sort of founder story, organic growth. And they lived in Austin, Texas, and she and her fiance at the time, he was a sushi chef, so he would like make the food. They delivered it door to door, just in the Austin and surrounding
he was a sushi chef.
Yeah, I know.
Is he still a sushi chef?
No. He actually continued to work in the business. He no longer does, but yeah, he was. You know, the business really continued to grow. My sister, you know, she and Rich, her fiance, worked on this for a few years in Austin. And when she got sick, you know, it felt like out of the blue. I mean, she was young, healthy. Like it just felt like just this shock. She moved she moved to a Shopify site because she wanted to be moving them to Maine to be closer to us. And that just sort of grew the company exponentially because suddenly we were shipping nationwide. So before she was just Austin. So she moved to this like, you know, Shopify site for a very sad reason, but it grew the company a lot. And then she worked on this business until the last week of her life. Like she was still working on this the last week of her life. So her passion for this and her dedication to this really has driven me forward too. You know, I mean, she had so much conviction about this. She never had a question. She like absolutely knew this was the best way for dogs to eat. You know, there was never any questioning. So yeah, so that's kind of was the trajectory. And then after she died, I stepped in. My dad came out of retirement to sort of run the operations and business side. Rich, her fiance, went. We had like a facility in Maine. We had workers showing up.
It's
we
like
had
a legit family business.
Yeah, it was. My poor dad was like retired, but we're like, no, Dad, you got to come back. So
like, Dad.
I know it was tough, and I think we were all just in so much grief too at the time, and it was hard because of that, but also there was like. It was cathartic too because you know felt like we were
building
keeping her
something
alive.
in her name.
Yeah.
I assume that you know you guys were growing steadily year over year. Mm-hmm. Was there a moment where you were like, wait a second, like this thing is there's a real opportunity to make this like the fastest growing direct to consumer raw food company in the game?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have seen significant penetration. And I think probably in 2021, we got a much bigger investment that sort of solidified the company. And since then, we have just been growing. We've been in a high growth phase since then. And I think it's also, you know, the product is amazing. People are more open to the product, just the idea of raw feeding. The brand is great. And I think that, you know, it continues, it will continue to grow. People are ready for something else. They're thinking about it for themselves, you know? It's like, I think it makes intuitive sense. You know, people like to have that light bulb moment when you like explain to them, like, guess what? Kibble came around in 1956. Like, this is actually the original dog diet. We always say it's so funny that this is called radical because we're like, this isn't, Kibble's the trend. Like, this has been around forever, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, this is, you know, what dogs are designed to eat. It is like what they've been thriving on for millennia.
It's so interesting when you think about it, right? Like I was talking to my kids about this the other day. Certain animals were designed to eat certain things, right? Yeah. And we were talking about dinosaurs. And you look at a brontosaurus, right? The huge, massive dinosaur. Yeah. And that animal only ate leaves from trees. That's all it ate.
Yeah.
Elephants, just
Yeah.
leaves, you know?
Yeah.
But then you look at, and the big difference is their teeth, right? Like
Yeah.
that's when you can see the difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting. I was talking about this with someone else recently about like, you know, any nutritionist or animal, you know, specialist will tell you that all you have to do is look at an animal's biological makeup and it reveals to you what they should be eating. So like with dogs, sharp, pointy teeth, short, fast digestive tracts. You know, they are, if everything about them, like no amylase in their saliva, no sideways movement of the jaw, like their jaws open and snap shut, you know, for ripping and tearing meat. No big flat molars at all for grinding up plant matter. Herbivore, like a horse, you know, big flat teeth, long digestive tract. They're supposed to eat a lot of fiber. I mean, really, it's not that. And people are like, there's no science behind it. There's no science. And it's like, but there is really.
But that's the science. I mean,
it
that's
starts there. It really starts there. Like nature has been telling us all along that this is, you know, the optimal diet for canines. There is some great, I will say, the University of Helsinki, there's a vet and a PhD named Dr. Anna Bjorkman, and she, along with some other independent researchers, are looking at the benefits of raw. And they've already discovered, I mean, not surprising to, I guess, the people that know it, but it's great to have this research that dogs fed raw are metabolically healthier than dogs on a kibble diet. Dogs fed raw have lower disease and inflammatory markers than those fed kibble diets. They also looked at puppies, and they discovered that puppies fed raw have a reduced likelihood of allergies or IBD as adults and have stronger immune systems. So there is also real science coming out, which is exciting because it's helping. I think it helps. It's hard to just use the nature argument all the time. It helps to have.
And is it because is there like sort of like not a wealth of science because people just haven't done the clinical studies?
Yeah, studies are expensive. They take a long time. I mean, but there's really not, our nutritionists will say there's not a ton of pet food studies in general, besides like, you know, there's nothing proving that kibble is healthier than raw, for example, or, you know, a lot of the studies have been kibble funded, or maybe you know, feed a dog something for 28 days and it doesn't have any health problems. And therefore it's like, okay, well, this is great for your dog, you know?
I just think anybody who's really conscious and really prioritizes their health should be considering this, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're a human being and you have an animal, and you know, like, look, finances are different for everyone, right? So like there's always that, you know? So like this is absolutely not for every single person on the planet. But I believe that all human beings should make their health their number one priority. And if you have an animal, in my opinion, it should funnel down to your animal, right?
Yeah.
Because of that relationship that I've talked about 5 times already that is I'm so passionate about.
Yeah.
For someone who's like just thinking about like, is there one thing that you can tell the audience that's listening that's just like, hey, like this is as simple as it gets. This is why this is something that you should consider. In my mind, and I know that this is something that I've kind of made up, but in my mind, I have big dogs and I've always had big dogs. Like I just want my dogs to live longer.
Yeah.
You know, like that's what I really want. And that's why like when I started with We Feed Raw, I was like, okay, like I obviously no company is ever going to tell me that the dogs are going to live longer, right? Like you can't do that.
Right.
But in my mind, that's what it is.
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm like, okay, this dog, they get a lot of activity, but I want them to feel really awesome. Yeah. And also live as long as possible.
Yeah, you want them to live better, right? And that we can promise. We can promise that your dog will live better when you feed them a whole foods diet that they are designed to derive their nutrients from. I mean, absolutely, that is something that we can say. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard because I think we've grossly underestimated what it costs to properly feed an animal. We've been trained to think that it's the same with humans, right? Like
same thing.
30% of, you know, I think a U.S. person's budget is healthcare and food. And it used to be 20% of that was food and 10% was healthcare. But over time, it's flipped, right? We're just spending less on putting good stuff into our bodies and more on treating the symptoms from putting crappy stuff into our bodies. And if we're doing that to ourselves, of course, our dogs are sort of getting the same thing. I think it's just a reallocation of funds. It's like investing more upfront in your dog's health will save you money in the long run. But I mean, preventative health is like a hard thing for people to value. So it's like it's a lot of times people will come to us after they've already been through something, right? And we're trying to get people before that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and he said something that was really smart. You know, he was like, we've taken a lot of heat at Creatures of Habit for introducing an oatmeal product that's arguably 10 times more expensive than Quaker, right? And they're like, okay, so you want me to pay $4.50 for your one pouch of oatmeal when I can get Quaker for 45 cents? Like, how is that? Like, how could you even think that makes sense? You know, we've understood that those people are not necessarily our people, right? Which is fine. Can't please everyone. But what I also have come to believe is that I've watched people get sick. I've watched my father his whole life or my whole life get sick, not take care of himself, and die young. And when I think about health, I don't think about it as a cost. I think about it as an investment. It's an investment. It's
an investment for
It's
sure.
an absolute investment, and it's like there's nothing more important in life than your health.
Yeah.
It's just not.
It's true. And you will save money in the life. Like you will save, and it's not just about money, right? But you'll have a better quality of life. You'll experience life better. Your dog will too. But you will ultimately save money. I think it's just like not getting people to, because a lot of the things, even with like a raw diet or us eating healthy, like you can't always see the things that are happening,
right.
But they are. It's improving your immune system. And so we just did a big survey actually with our current customers, and it was, I think 97% of them said that they believe food could be powerful medicine, more powerful than conventional medicine, which is amazing. But I was like striking because I have very health conscious friends. I don't even think 97% of them would say that. But I mean, we're getting people that have seen the light. They understand the importance of nutrition for themselves, and they're applying those same learnings to their dogs. Yeah, I mean, I think that all of this happening, I mean, we're probably very much in this world, so it's easy to think like everyone's thinking,
right.
But it's sometimes hard to get people to. I mean, we're not the dog food company that, the person who was like, it's just a dog, like whatever, like it's just a dog. Like that. Those people probably aren't going to feed our food. That's okay.
Right.
We don't need to like.
Right. You can't please everyone. You're not for everyone.
Yeah, but if you want your dog to live better, maybe longer, it's like. You can't expecting a dog to live a healthy, happy, disease-free life on only, fast food, basically, kibble. It's the same as expecting a person to live a happy, healthy, disease-free life.
I mean, I think that's a great comparison, right?
Yeah.
Because that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
Like if someone just ate Burger King
or McDonald's, everyone would be like, you can't do that. Like but like with dogs, when you say they can't eat kibble, they're like, well, why not? It's like, but it's literally kind of the same thing,
right.
Yeah.
This is such a fun conversation. I think not enough people know much about raw food, raw dog food. Like when you had mentioned that it was super fringe when Alyssa founded it, and it's like even fringe today.
Yeah.
I think when I said it, and I live in a community, in upstate New York now. There's lots of hippie dippies. You know what I mean? Lots of hippie folk. Yeah. And, when I said raw food, they were like, oh, we've been feeding our dogs raw forever.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But, they're all, they're like, they make,
they're like already, it's funny because like, it's so funny that you say that because in our survey that we just did, trying to understand better who our current customer is, there's definitely like the people that are New Yorkers, reading the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. They've found raw feeding through enlightenment. But then there's another group of people like in even like Alabama and they're like, this is just the way that dogs eat. Like we know that, it's like they've had this sort of, realization. The journey has been different, but we were talking about it at work, it's sort of like Levi's or something like, there's the guys on the farm that wear Levi's because they're really functional. And then the people in New York City that.
Totally.
So.
Where's the company in 5 years?
Oh, man. I think that we'll. Really want to. So right now, our current customer, the biggest cohort, 100% of that feed 100% raw feeding. So the biggest cohort right now, fully raw. Then the second biggest cohort is people who are feeding 50% raw, 50% kibble. Both very happy customers. The industry data, though, shows us that 85% of consumers, pet owners feeding fresh or frozen, fresh frozen, like gently cooked frozen and raw frozen, are only doing it partially. So we know that we have to really embrace this like partial raw feeding. We know to get more raw into more bowls, we're really going to have to go in that direction. And still always believe that, of course, the more you can do, the better. But being able to support that, I think, is really going to help us broaden our audience.
Is there a way to make a just awesome kibble?
No. Kibble's always ultra processed, but there's other shelf stable things that we can do that I can't talk about right now, but it's definitely in the works. I mean, all of that's going to inform our future pipeline, definitely looking at more functional foods and whole foods that could maybe be more shelf stable. But yeah, it's always going to be what's best for the dogs. Like, we're always thinking about what's best for the dogs. And I feel like that's what is wrong with the pet food industry, is like, is anyone asking what's best for the dogs? Or is it just about, like, one of our favorite lines is Kibble is a convenience food, not a health food. Like, it is very convenient. It is cost effective. Those are its two benefits, but it wasn't created as a health food for dogs,
So the Creatures That Have a Podcast tends to really focus on meeting great, cool people and talking about the habits, rituals, and routines that keep them on top of their game and ultimately happy.
Yeah.
And I didn't really dive into that much on this episode because I really want people to understand that this like dog food thing is a real thing.
Yeah.
And our dogs could have healthy habits too.
Yeah.
The hard part is that it's totally up to us.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we are in absolute control.
Yeah.
The hardest part about being a dog owner is that you are in control of that animal's life.
Yep.
All the way till the very end.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so, and the hardest and the most incredible, right? Like, you are in control, so you can make those habits awesome. Like, we choose. In my world, most people that I tend to associate with chooses better habits, and because of that, I think that like allowing that to flow through with everything that you love in life is awesome, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to keep this one on the dogs. Is there just for like the entrepreneurial people that listen, because we get a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the podcast, is there a lesson over the last decade that you can kind of share that you think something that was really hard for you in growing the business, like super duper hard, that you like maybe a phase or a season that you went through that was just like,
oh yeah,
gosh,
it was so hard for it's like, I mean, it's
always hard.
It's never not hard. Now that we have we're capitalized to scale and we have like a really solid team, I don't have as many sleepless nights, but I mean, there is a period when it was like,
like, how close were you to being like, oh my God, this might be it?
Oh, lots of times. Like
I
months
love
of
when I hear that.
And my husband, actually, I dragged into this too for a while. He's no longer, he was the only one in the family with an MBA. And I was like, you. And he's like, no, not me. I'm like, yes, you're going to help us. So there was because, the business after my sister died and we kind of like stepped in, it really it almost was like the company grew faster than the skill set of the people involved. And not to say anything, everyone tried their best and did amazing, but there was a lot of expensive mistakes, and it was just this is a tough business. I mean, we're shipping raw frozen meat around the country, and we used to ship from Maine, which is like, can you imagine how hard that is to get to like all over the country? And now we have distribution centers all over, so we have like 1 to 2 day shipping times. It's like it's a totally different thing.
I mean, shipping frozen is hard.
It's very hard, and especially when you don't have enough warehouses. But now we are in a great place. But I guess lesson is just like I mean, there is times when I had to like dig deep to say like, is this a blessing or a curse that my sister because it was hard. There was lots of times when we didn't know if it was going to make it, and I'm so glad that I mean, it sounds so cheesy to say, but like not giving up, but like really not giving up. I don't think I'd ever not given up in this way before my entire life. So when you don't give up and you get over to you get to the other side of what that looks like, it's pretty amazing. Because you're like, I never would have known all of these things if I had just given up all of those times when it would have been easier. And so I remember one, tough time, and I'm like, I don't know. I need something to like somebody, like I can't. And someone told me about the podcast, How I Built This. And I
podcast.
listened to it, like binged it for like 3 weeks, and it saved my life. Like I was like, okay, like there are other people out there. It was like a support group, you know? Yeah.
That is like everybody. I was telling a guest earlier, there is this sort of unrealistic glamour and shine on entrepreneurship. I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't think you would either at this point, right? Like once you are, it's very, very difficult to think about another way.
Yeah.
But it is super duper hard.
Yeah.
And I have been operating and owning businesses since 2010. So I've been at it for some time for my age. And we were at we don't do many events because it's very difficult to make overnight oats for thousands of people, right? Like
this is why we have frozen raw meat. I'm like, how are we going to do an event?
Yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah.
However, these last few weeks I've committed to a few events, and so last weekend we had an event, and my team is all remote, and when it comes to making these oats, I'm the guy. And last weekend I was given this opportunity we had an event on Long Island. And a friend said, hey, you know, you can make it here. And I was down in this dark basement by myself, hot, making oats for 1,500 people by myself.
Yeah.
Didn't have service down there, so no music, just alone with oats. Alone with the oats.
Alone with the oats. That's your next memoir.
And do I wish, like, I really wanted to make some content being like, so you think it's all fun and games, right? You think it's all benzos and, you know, like, it is like a real grind.
Oh, yeah. It's grit. It's the grind. It's like the uncertainty that I think is most hard for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people don't have that, you know? You really have to be tolerant of the uncertainty. And I think the personal growth I went through in this whole experience, I think most grateful for. I didn't know that I had some of this in me. I didn't know that I was capable of learning the things that I had to learn, or, you know, tolerating. It's like a low level of pain and agony all the time, you know. But and now it's like
it's a chronic pain that just is there.
It's still hard. It's always hard, but the reward now is that we have this thriving business that's helping so many dogs. Like I'm so grateful that I get to be part of something that I believe in so much, you know?
I just didn't know, and again, I said it at the top of the podcast, I just didn't know how much it was going to affect me going to raw food.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah.
You know, like it's like if you feed a dry food and you like go walk over, you take a scoop, you put it in the bowl, it's done. It. Yeah. With raw food, it's like it takes a little time, not a lot of time, but you're actually putting, like, I'm sitting there and I've got the 2 bowls out and I add my eggs to it.
I love your bowls. They look so great.
and I really admit it actually, you know, there's just something about it that, like, I really feel like I'm taking super initiative to, like, really make my dog's life better, you know? And so I'm grateful that I'm grateful you didn't give up. I'm grateful you didn't give up.
Yes,
you know?
I'm grateful too. Yeah.
So where can people find We Feed Raw? Where can they find you, follow along your journey?
We Feed Raw, or We Feed Raw on Instagram. You can check out our website at wefeedraw.com. We're direct to consumer only, so all of our meal plans are customized for your dog. So you'll go and fill out a questionnaire about your dog, and then we put together a meal plan based on their individual needs and ship it directly to your doorstep. It's pretty easy. I mean, it's about as easy as frozen raw feeding can get. We try to make it as easy as possible. So,
and one thing that I'll just mention that you might not, like, if this is something that you're considering, like, something that I didn't know is that the food doesn't have to be completely thought out.
No.
Right? It actually is. It's easier for us when it's like halfway.
Yeah, because you can portion it easier.
It
depends on the dogs. Like, some dogs, they don't, especially when you're first transitioning, if they're not used to the cold temperature, you might want it to be a little closer to room temp. Sometimes we tell people, even in the beginning, if you want to gently sear it, it's okay. Like, it's totally fine. But yeah, if you can feed your dogs, like, that's the easiest way, because you just get the little cubes.
Yeah, they just love that.
Yeah, it's great.
They love it.
And it looks better. It doesn't look like a bowl of mush. Yeah. But, you know, people love I don't know if you notice this with our food, but a lot of my friends that have gotten the food are like, it looks like it's straight from the butcher. Like it's red, it's
100%.
vibrant. It's like
Oh
this
no,
beautiful
it
meat.
looks like ground meat
Yeah.
that you would get.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100% ground meat that
Yeah.
you would get from
Yeah.
the butcher.
So that's like definitely one of our, I would say, value props in a lot of ways, because a lot of the other players it kind of looks like burnt tofu, or, you know, even if you go to a retail store and get raw frozen out of the freezer, it's kind of like gray, it has freezer burn. So we cut out the middleman, so we can just ship this directly from our freezers to yours, so it can stay really fresh.
You're the best. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
making
for
a great
having me.
product, having a
Thank you.
great brand behind it, and a real story to support the whole entire thing.
Thanks,
You know,
Michael.
it's so nice to have a fellow entrepreneur doing great things and sharing the story. You know, I think human beings love listening to stories, and then there's always a select handful of people that are good at telling them. So thanks for telling it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all shapes, sizes, and genders, thank you so much for listening to this podcast today. I really enjoyed talking with Amy. I am fired up that I've got Bowie and Murphy on We Feed Raw. And like I said in the podcast, I'm really serious about the fact that, like, I've seen a pretty significant shift in both animals, and just in terms of how excited they are to eat. And also, the first sign that I saw was in their coat and how shiny their coat was. I posted about it 2 days ago. Literally, like, I put Bowie's food down, I put Murphy's food down, and the sun was coming into the mudroom where they eat, and like his coat was like shiny. Like, I was like, whoa, this dude looks like a Black Panther. But yeah, so obviously I'm fired up about We Feed Raw. I'm fired up about giving my dogs raw food for the first time. Really wanted to do it for a long time, and now I get to sit with the founder who is built this awesome brand and awesome company. So if you love this podcast, you know, share it with a friend or a family member, specifically dog owners. I think everybody that's a dog owner, which is a lot of people, would appreciate this and learn something really valuable. You know, I have had unfortunate situations with sick dogs. I can't point their, you know, the situations that they've had directly to the food, but I would argue to say that it probably had a big impact in two of my dogs that had developed some, you know, random cancers at a young age. So I just empower you all just to take a look. Just to take a look at it. And that's because I love dogs so much. Anyway, check out We Feed Raw and give us a 5-star rating and write us a review too. That would be dope. Subscribe to the podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast, and have an epic day, really. And if this is the nighttime for you, sleep well, friends. Until the next one, peace.